What is good, guys? Welcome back to the Benefit Podcast, bringing you everything you need to know about living your best life. And this one is a very, very appropriate episode because I'm about 6 weeks post shoot now, and I thought it'd be a really, really interesting time to talk about 3 of the biggest mistakes I see at the end of a dieting phase. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've got ready for a shoot or a show. It could just be that you've dieted because you wanted to lose a load of weight. It could be for a holiday. It could be for a wedding, event, a party. Whatever the goal was that you wanted to diet for, when you get to the end of that phase, there are some big mistakes that people make. I've made these myself in the past. And so what I want to share with you in this episode is how to avoid making these mistakes. Now, the reason that people often make these mistakes, like this post-diet period, is actually a really vulnerable position for people to be in. Like when you've been dieting, when you've had like laser focus on a goal, as I say, whether that's a photo shoot, whether that's stepping on a bodybuilding stage, whether that's a wedding, an event, a holiday, whatever it is, you've got this very like clear deadline, time frame, goal in mind, and the whole process of dieting becomes really, really, really easy. I say easy. It becomes easier because you're focused on the outcome. You've dieted down, you've potentially had to push yourself really, really hard. Again, depending on the level of condition that you've wanted to get in. Your calories have probably gone pretty low, your output's gone pretty high. You're in a position where your body is wanting food, it's wanting to gain some weight back. And that can do some pretty crazy things for people. Now, the first mistake I'm going to talk about is one that I see happen a lot, and it's increasing calories way too much, way too soon. Again, this does depend on how hard you've pushed. It does depend on the level of calories in which you've got to. Generally speaking, we want to get you back up to your new estimated maintenance as quickly as possible. If you've been in that deficit for a long period of time, your body fat levels are low, we want to get you back into a good spot. And so we want to get those calories back up. But that new maintenance is going to be very different to what it was at the start of the dieting phase, particularly if you've lost a significant amount of weight in the process. So sometimes that might actually mean that we take a more gradual approach to increasing. And again, this is person dependent because some people can almost handle a much bigger increase because they can still keep control, they can still stay on track. Other people may not be able to do that, or they may be a lot more fearful of making that bigger increase. So, and again, just to put some numbers on this, like let's say, for example, in order to get yourself down to being really, really lean, you were pushing really hard, your calories got down to 1,1300 calories. Like my calories got down that low as part of my shoot prep. And my estimated new maintenance was probably somewhere around 2,300, 2,500, 1,000 calories more than what I was dieting on. Now, I am the kind of person that can probably handle just the increase of 1,000 calories because my mindset was good. I knew what was coming. Some clients are going to really struggle with that. People will just think, I can't eat another 1,000 calories. It's just, I'm suddenly going to gain loads of weight, and it's all just becomes very, very scary. So you might creep that up gradually over the course of a few weeks, even a month. It might be that you increase 200 to 300. We let that settle in. We let that do its thing. We increase by another 200 to 300. And so you can take that more gradual approach. But what often happens is people they get to the end of that diet phase and then they just completely lose their minds. It's like, everything that you had sort of avoided, restricted, limited as part of that diet phase, all of a sudden in your mind, you think that that's fair game again. And so calories start to go absolutely out of control. And it's not even the notion of just having a calorie increase that scares you. It's almost that there's no control whatsoever, and the head falls off, the pizzas, the burgers, the ice creams, the junk food, the takeaway, the chocolate, all of those things that you haven't had for a long, long time, all of a sudden that becomes the thing that you lean into. And that is a tricky one. Like these things go hand in hand. So you've got the sort of increase in calories that can be difficult to handle. But there's also, linked to that can be almost like a reverting to old habits and bad habits as well. The things that had got you into the situation in the first place that you wanted to change, having the weekly takeaway, having a couple of biscuits every time you had a hot drink, like all of these things that had got you into pretty bad shape before you knew that something needed to change. It almost becomes like the sort of the diet phase is done. So this freedom, this flexibility, all of a sudden, like there isn't any restriction in your mind. And so all of this stuff becomes fair game, and you justify it to yourself because you'll start to be, the diet's over, I've earned it. And, initially having a bit of that stuff is absolutely fine. Like, it's not uncommon at all for people to have some sort of meal with their partner, with their family, with their friends, because they might have restricted stuff for a long time. They might have said no to a lot of that stuff for, the length of time that it's taken them to get to the position they want. And so actually they might enjoy a little bit of food. But again, it's keeping control of that. It's not letting that become meal after meal, day after day, week after week, where you just absolutely go to town. Because the longer that goes on for, basically you're just going to add loads of body fat, way more body fat than is necessary. And in a few weeks' time, you're going to feel so horrendous that you want to diet again because you're looking absolutely terrible. So the increase in calories is one thing that's really, really tricky. The idea or the notion that you've like earned it, and then this additional freedom and flexibility almost creates the idea that you can just absolutely go to town. But one of the biggest factors in this whole thing, and something that will also help manage those other things I've just spoken about, but one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is stopping working with the coach that has helped them in that phase of dieting. What can happen and does happen is that people think they're signing up with the coach to help them reach that initial goal. And I get that. You are like, you've got that goal to get in photo shoot shape, get on stage, go on holiday, go to the wedding, whatever it is, you've hired that person to help you get to that point. And they have, and you've worked with them, they've dieted you down, they've got you looking absolutely fantastic. But the mindset that then it's done is a big, big issue. Because if you think at that point that you've learned everything you need to learn to be able to maintain that, it just isn't going to happen, because what you've learned in that process really is how to diet. Yes, there are going to be some good habits and stuff you've picked up along the way. And like as coaches, or certainly the way that I coach, I want to try and help you to understand how these things can be managed and maintained moving forwards. But there is nothing like actually doing it and being part of that process. And, if you get to the point of like the shoot, the show, the wedding, the holiday, whatever it is, and then you just cut all ties with that coach, I can almost guarantee you that in 2 to 3 months' time, you're going to be getting back in touch with them again, because you've added all of that weight back on again, and you're already ready to get back into a diet. Whereas if you continue to work with that coach for a period of time, and again, the length of time that you're going to work with them is going to depend on what's going on and what your new goals become. But even if your goal is simply to maintain like relatively lean condition, working with that coach for a period of 2, 3, 6 months even, to understand how to manage and maintain that physique is going to be so, so valuable. Like, because that's a skill, and that's a skill that you can then use for a long time to come. Some people might have goals to grow. And again, if the goal is to grow, you need to do that properly. You need to come out of that diet phase the right way, reverse the right way, gradual increases where needed, and not just, absolutely all of a sudden pile on a load of unnecessary weight. But that coach is going to give you not only the X's and O's, like they're going to give you the right calorie increases at the right times. They're going to manage your training, your cardio, your steps. They're going to manage all of those black and white things for you and make sure that you're doing the right things. They're also going to be a massive, massive help when it comes to just that mental state of actually coming out of a phase of dieting, which isn't easy. Mentally, you've got yourself to this lean point, and then all of a sudden the thought of losing some of that leanness, and again, this does depend on how lean you've got, But the thought of losing some of that can be really difficult to overcome. But if you're working with someone who's going to help manage through that, who's going to be there for you to ask questions, to be, someone who can help keep your head screwed on, all of that stuff is just vital when it comes to coming out of that diet phase in the right place. The last thing that we want to see as coaches is somebody stopped working with us at the end of a diet, and we do see them in 3 months' time absolutely balloon back up again. Like that, it's actually quite heartbreaking. And if only they'd have stayed with us for that extra 3 months, they could be in a really, really good spot in 3 months, rather than coming back to us in, the condition that they were at the very beginning or worse. And I know, some people might be saying, well, isn't that your fault for having not being able to equip them with the right skills, whilst you were dieting? And we will take responsibility as much as possible, but we also need the ability to work with the person to give them the experience. Like in the moment where you are dieting, your focus is on dieting. You want to get the weight off. You want to lose the body fat. You want to see the definition. You want to achieve the tone. All of these things that we want. And actually, it's about trying to almost focus on one thing at a time. Sometimes, towards the end of that diet phase, I am starting to talk about the next steps and managing post and doing all of these things, because I know how important that is. And very, very commonly, the clients I work with will understand the importance of that, because we've been having those discussions in the 4 to 6 weeks before, the end of the diet phase. We'll already start to talk about the way that we reverse out of it. We're already starting to talk about the next goals, the future, the things that are going to happen, without taking our eye off the fact that we've still got the original goal in place. But you do need to be thinking a bit longer term. And as I say, it's a very, very vulnerable position to be in. And it's important that it is managed and handled the right way to make sure that you get the most out of it. Like I say, the last thing that I want for any of the people I work with is to see them in a few months' time in a worse state than when they came to me in the first place. Like that, for me, just isn't the goal at all. And so for me, being able to work with someone for a period of time after the diet is finished is a vital part of that coaching process. So just take that on board and just factor that in where you are thinking about working with someone, or if you're working with someone right now and they're not talking about the next stages and the future and what's to come, is something that you might need to broach with them, because it is such an important phase. It's very tricky to manage. I've done it very wrong in the past. I've done it very right this time around, but I've definitely done it very wrong in the past. And a big part of that I put down to the fact that I am still working with the coach who helped me get into photo shoot shape. They're the ones who have managed the increases in my calories, the reductions in my activity levels, making those changes at the right time, whilst also keeping my head in the right place. And so I don't get carried away. They give me the accountability. So again, I'm not in a situation where I'm second guessing or anything. And it's so important, so important. So if you have any questions on that, if you're not sure, if you've, done stuff wrong in the past, let me know. I'm interested to hear. But otherwise, give this a nice review, give this a nice comment, like it, share it, subscribe, do all that amazing stuff wherever you happen to be watching or listening. And I'll be back again next week with another episode.